I would like to start off by reading what the Attorney General's job is. The Attorney General is the state's top lawyer and law enforcement official, protecting and serving the people and interests of Michigan through a broad range of duties. The Attorney General's responsibility include safeguarding the public from violent criminals, helping victims of crime, leading the fight against human trafficking and opioid abuse, preserving Michigan's natural resources, protecting consumers, and addressing illegal business practices. And the Attorney General oversees more than 500 lawyers, investigators, and other employees. They represent the people of Michigan in civil and criminal matters before trial courts, appellate courts, Supreme Courts of Michigan and the United States. They serve as legal counsel to state officers and, with a few exceptions, state agencies, boards, and commissions. They assist the prosecuting attorneys, local law enforcement, and federal criminal justice agencies in the administration of justice. They render opinions on questions of law when requested to do so by the governor, legislature, or any other official. They prepare and review contracts and agreements involving the state of Michigan, and they manage programs and special projects to detect and crack down on fraudulent, unfair, and illegal activities that victimize consumers and threaten public safety. On questions of law, when requested to do so by the governor, legislature, or any other official. They prepare and review contracts and agreements involving the state of Michigan, and they manage programs and special projects to detect and crack down on fraudulent, unfair, and illegal activities that victimize consumers and threaten public safety. I'd like to introduce our candidates. Senator Tanya Shootmaker was actually the farmer's daughter, is that right? She was raised on a farm in Antwerp Township. She's a Bachelor of Arts degree from Michigan State University and her law degree, her JD, from the Detroit College of Law. Tanya became an attorney and partner at a law firm in Paw Paw. She concentrated in family estate business and municipal law, 3 terms in the House of Representatives, and she is the President pro tempore of the Senate. Tanya serves on the Senate Appropriations Committee as chairman of the Subcommittee on Higher Education and is a member of the Capital Outlay of Community Colleges and Judiciary Appropriations Subcommittee. She serves as co-chair of the Judiciary Committee and a member of the Energy and Technology Committee.
And vice chair of Judiciary.
Oh, and vice chair of Judiciary, I'm sorry. Tom Leonard earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Spanish. Muy bien.
It was just a minor, I forgot it all.
You might know, but things are going to be changing in Michigan, I guess. And that's from the University of Michigan, and received his Juris Doctorate from Michigan State University College of Law. So you got both U of M and MSU covered here.
Go blue.
No green?
Go green.
Very good.
Go Irish.
Tom served as an assistant attorney general and a prosecutor for Genesee County, and he was assigned to the Special Crimes Division in Flint. He was elected as state representative in the 93rd District in Michigan House of Representatives, and he is now the Speaker of the House. What we're going to do now is give up to 5 minutes for our, I hate to call them debaters, but for our candidates here to give their opening statements. And I'd like you to, when you give your opening statements, perhaps tell us what are the top priorities for the Attorney General. So,
who's going to be your timekeeper?
And we got, I picked a timekeeper that you can hear without a microphone. We got Jim Tino on timekeeping. We'll give them 5 minutes each, please. And we'll start off with Senator Shootmaker.
Well, very good. Thank you. First off, before I get started with my opening statement, I really want to thank York for putting this on. I look forward to a vigorous debate of the issues tonight. Second, I really want to thank all those that have served in our military. We had a very moving memorial service this morning, in the Senate chambers. We have a memorial service to honor those veterans that have served our country. I have always believed that we are the country of freedom and opportunity. And so on behalf of myself and the whole Senate chamber, we honor those that have given those sacrifices. I grew up on a family farm where I learned the value of hard work. I grew up picking asparagus before and after school, and I grew up in a family that believed in faith and freedom. I was always told by my mom to present and to go out and make the world a better place. She said, you're an image of God, and to go out and use your God-given talents to go out and make the world a better place than what you found it. And that is really the reason of why I kind of do what I do. You know, neither of us, we give up and we sacrifice a lot being on the campaign trail to serve you, the residents. And so that's kind of what motivates me. In terms of the three things that I think that you should consider when voting for an Attorney General candidate for all those precinct delegates out there, first, does that candidate represent your values and your principles? I can tell you that I believe in freedom, I believe in the dignity of life, I believe in the rule of law, and I think that I stand with our shared values. Second, does that candidate have a proven record? I became an attorney 24 years ago, which I guess is dating myself, but I'm the only candidate here that practiced law in the private sector. I've not been on the government dime my whole life. I know what it's like to earn a paycheck and to sign both sides of the paycheck. Next, I have had the extreme opportunity to serve the residents of my district, both in the House and in the Senate. And my proven record there doesn't stop. My proven record of legislation that I've carried over deals with protecting seniors and vulnerables. It gives tools to law enforcement in terms of the legislation that I have passed to help solve cold cases. We have a huge problem with opioids and drugs. I was honored that the governor appointed me to the Opioid Abuse Task Force to help deal with the problems. I've carried that legislation, that very important legislation that will make sure that we solve this huge problem that is deteriorating our communities. That is what I feel passionate about in terms of public service. And then also, I have helped with law enforcement with regards to receiving I've been awarded Legislator of the Year for the Sheriff's Association because of my work. I've been Legislator of the Year not once but twice. I'm the only second legislator that have received the Chief of Police Legislator of the Year because of my work dealing with these important legal issues. I also have served all 13 years as Vice Chair of Judiciary. These are the laws that the Attorney General will have to live by, that law enforcement has to live by, and I think that says that my record is firm when it comes to having a proven record. And then also, I have practiced in the private practice in all segments. So I think then the third and final thing is to elect a candidate that is the most electable. We, unfortunately, probably won't be able to hang on to maybe the Michigan House if the polls that I'm seeing out there now are true. And so it's important to put up our strongest and best candidates. And I think that's me. I've run in very competitive seats that President Barack Obama have won, and I've done it as a conservative without sacrificing my conservative principles and values. I ask for your vote, and I thank you very much for coming out and listening.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Before I get into this, the one thing I will take issue with, the Michigan House of Representatives, the Republicans, will be holding majority this time. It has been such an incredible honor and blessing to serve as Speaker of the House, and truly something I thank the Lord for every single day. And as you all know in this room tonight, we, and when I say we, because this is a team effort, meaning my beautiful bride and I, Janelle, have made this decision to run for Attorney General. And did so with a lot of thought and a lot of prayer, and things have gone exceptionally well. We made the decision after we came off the island during the Republican Mackinac Conference, not only winning the straw poll 2-1, but also being the highest vote-getting candidate on the entire island. And since then, we have not let up. We've got the endorsement of 3 congressmen, Congressman John Molinar, General Jack Bergman, as well as Congressman Paul Mitchell. the 3 congressmen from the areas with the highest Donald Trump turnout. We've got the endorsement of Ted Nugent. We've got the endorsement of several of you great conservatives sitting in this room right now. I'm looking at Mary Ann Henry. I'm looking at Jim Tedder, who's going to be your next state senator. I'm looking at Jim Runstad. I'm looking at Michonne Maddock, and the list goes on and on. 35 state committee members, 25 county chairs, I believe 6 district chairs. But we're not going to take this for granted. And I will tell you why I believe I am the best candidate for us to put up this fall. As was mentioned, we are going to be faced with somebody, the stakes could not be higher. If at all possible, she is actually further left than Bernie Sanders. This is somebody who has made clear that her #1 priority as the state's next Attorney General is to do everything she can to attack our president and to fight his agenda. This is somebody who has openly said she will determine which laws she's going to uphold. In fact, we're working on a work requirement right now for Medicaid expansion, and she has openly said that if that passes and becomes law when she's the state's next Attorney General, she will not enforce it. This is somebody who is so vulgar and so far left that when a conservative icon, Phyllis Schlafly, passed away in 2016, she made fun of her death on Facebook. We've got to put up our best against her. When you look at my background, I am the only candidate on our ticket that's running that has prosecution experience. I was a drug prosecutor in Flint for 3 years, and I will tell you this, when I wasn't in the courtroom putting the bad guys away, I went out on the streets with the officers. I was with them. I saw what they did. I was that person that put on those dirty pair of jeans, that hoodie sweatshirt, and that bulletproof vest, because I wanted those officers to know that if they were going to have my back in the courtroom, I was going to have their backs out on the streets. From there, I went on to the Attorney General's office for 2 years. And when I'm elected the state's next Attorney General, it will be the first time in the history of our state that we've actually elected somebody that has experience in that office. We've also talked about how far left Dana Nessel is. I will tell you this, when we compete against her in the fall, we can't beat her by running to the center. We've got to hit her punch for punch, pound for pound, whatever you want to call it, and we've got to put up our most conservative candidate. I have no doubt that I'm the most conservative candidate sitting here tonight. I am the only one sitting here that has opposed Common Core state standards from day one. I am the only candidate that voted against the internet tax. I am the only candidate that has never wavered when it came to making English the official language of the state of Michigan. If we are going to beat Dana Nessel in the fall, we cannot beat her by running to the center. We've got to beat her by running to the right. For the first time, in 30 years, we polled this state for a Republican nominee. And let me tell you this, he did not win this state by running to the center. He won this state by staying true to our values, true to our principles, our conservative principles, and that's how we won, and that's how we're going to win in the fall. I will tell you this, I'm not going after Trump voters in the fall, or excuse me, I'm not going after Obama voters in the fall, I'm going after Trump voters. That's how we're going to win.
Let's each for a rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you very much. There will be a lot of discussions, and I look forward to a vigorous debate. We expect our Attorney General to be firm in principle, and we expect our Attorney General to stand for justice. And we deserve an Attorney General who will not give us lip service and pander to delegates. You just heard my opponent talk about he will bring back a majority of the House. Well, let me ask you this. One of the first meetings that actually it was a Lincoln Day dinner, and I'm sure you'll remember this. It was in north of your district, Teresa Grace. What was that Lincoln Day dinner where she's the chair? Shiawassee. Thank you. Shiawassee, where Mr. Speaker said that a speaker's #1 role is to bring back a majority. Ladies and gentlemen, he decided to run for office 10 months into his election. 10 months. He decided to take a different job and to devote 100% of his efforts into running for Attorney General, rather than on the job that he was elected to do, and that was to bring back a Republican majority. That should really sit with all of you. Rather than bring back a Republican majority and devote 100% of his efforts, he's deciding with his own ambition to run for another job. On the campaign trail, he tells us over and over, and I'm sure you've heard it, about how he pushed for an income tax cut. And he fought, but he fell short. He failed in delivering the votes of that. Well, that really is a failure. It's a failure of leadership. And then what's even further, he decided, rather than put the budget or the tax cut into the budget, he decided to put it just in his campaign speech. Ladies and gentlemen, you can do common math. In order to deliver a tax cut, you have to put it in the budget. I was there in 2010 when we had to cut roughly $1.5 million or $1.5 billion out of the state budget. I ask for your vote. I think my record is clear. I will not give you lip service. I will not pander for your votes. I will tell you the straight up truth. Sometimes we may disagree on issues, sometimes we may not. But ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. One person has ambition to rise up and not do the job that he was elected to do, and another has done the job faithfully for 8 years in the Senate, 6 years in the House, and then a record of achievement in the private practice.
Well, the story of the tax cut, so I don't even have to go there. But what I do want to talk about is my commitment to majority. I can tell you this term, House Republicans have set record after record after record when it comes to fundraising. In fact, right now, we are sitting more than $1 million more cash on hand than House Republicans ever had before. There is nobody more committed to majority than I am. In fact, this cycle alone, I have personally given out of my campaign accounts money that could be used to help me run for Attorney General. Money that I could be using for negative ads like my opponent has. I have personally given to our caucus over $200,000. To the best of my knowledge, Senator Shoemaker has not given her caucus a dime this cycle. We've got a tough year coming up ahead. If there's somebody that's committed to majority for their caucus, I would say look at the facts, look at the person that has already given over $200,000 to their caucus, money that could go into my campaign account, versus the person that has given zero to her caucus this cycle.
What is your opinion of, and this has to do with the marijuana referendum, which according to the polling that you cited, looks like it will pass in the fall and more than likely will become part of our culture in Michigan. So what is your opinion of marijuana in general, and assuming the legalization of marijuana for recreational use passes in November, what would your position be? And Senator Shoemaker, would you like to?
I will probably vote no on this. I have huge concerns in terms of public safety, in terms of the increase of drug driving that you will see, and also the effects of marijuana on young children. And so that's of concern with me. Would I have said that as your next Attorney General, that if the voters do approve it, I will fight for what the voters choose. I believe in the power of the vote. Thank you.
Good.
For me, there will be no probably. If it happens to come up for vote, I will be voting no. I've been very clear. I am opposed to this. I am opposed to the legalization of marijuana. But much like Senator Shoemaker, if this is the will of the people, if they do decide to put this into law, then as the next Attorney General, I will uphold.
Next question has to do with the recent Supreme Court decision regarding sports gaming in Michigan at our casinos and online gaming. And what would your position be on that? What's the implications, the legal implications to Michigan on that? Do you want to start with that one, Tom?
Yeah, so personally, Matt, and I thank you for the question, I am personally opposed to the expansion of gambling. You know, as a former prosecutor, I've seen the way that it has ruined families. I've seen people with habits that fall into this trap and then unfortunately find themselves into crime and doing other things. So I am personally opposed to the expansion of gambling. In terms of the constitutionality of this and whether or not it would be considered a expansion of gambling within our Constitution, this is something that we're still looking into. But for myself, I am certainly opposed to it.
I oppose the expansion of gambling as well, and I believe there's legislation over in the House dealing with this issue.
Okay, next question. And we'll start this one with Senator Shoemaker. What is your opinion on the reform on civil asset forfeiture legislation which is going on right now?
Thank you very much for that question. I can tell you that last session that we passed civil asset forfeiture reform, and that was a good step to make sure that the government doesn't seize people's property without authority and goes against their rights. I can also tell you that there is a Representative Lucido bill that is going to come over to Judiciary. Actually, I think it is in the Judiciary Committee, and I look forward to deciding that. I talked to the chairman about that, Chairman Jones, and Chairman Jones says that Representative Runstead also has a package dealing with civil asset forfeiture, and so rather than have any inconsistencies between your package and also Representative Lucido's package, he's going to wait to have a hearing before your bill comes over to Judiciary. So once the two bills are over in the Senate Judiciary Committee, I look forward to voting on them and making sure that people's rights are protected.
I'm not going to mince words here. I believe the government we should require a conviction before the government takes. We did work on some very good reform last term, but unfortunately didn't go far enough. It only required a clear and convincing standard. The bill that we just passed, of all the civil asset forfeiture bills that are out there right now, there is only one that requires a conviction before the government can take your property. We have passed that. It is now sitting in the Judiciary Committee. And I would hope that Senator Shoemaker, being a member of leadership, would encourage Senator Jones to bring that up very soon and would support that because, again, this is America. We ought to require a conviction before the government takes your property.
The next question is in regard referencing the MSU settlement that recently happened. And this actually is a little technical, but there's pending legislation to change the Defense of Government Immunity and notice of intent requirements. This is evidently there's laws that give immunity to members of the government and making it retroactive to 1997. With that, this could potentially open a flood of lawsuits. What is your opinion on this pending legislation?
Yeah, well, Matt, we just passed legislation today to fix that issue. It is now over to the Senate. But let me say this, and I'm glad you brought up this Michigan State University issue. Because I don't believe there's one issue out there right now that draws a clear distinction between the two candidates sitting before you right now. Back in November, I looked at the facts of this case, and I saw how heinous this situation was. And after looking at the facts of this case, I was the first elected official in the state of Michigan to call on President Luann Simon to resign. And I will tell you this, I took a lot of heat for that. In fact, within weeks, my opponent, Senator Shoemaker, went to the media, accused me of political grandstanding, and defended President Simon for her actions. Then, when asked what she intended to do about the situation as chair of the Committee on Higher Education, was essentially told, there's nothing we can do. I didn't stop. We pushed forward, we worked hard, and we uncovered thousands of pages of documentation. And that documentation is probably going to lead to further criminal charges. A couple months later, the whole House passed a resolution calling on Luann Simon to resign. And within an hour, Senate leadership called me to let me know that the House was on a limb and that what we had done was not right. Well, let me tell you this. Within an hour, Luann Simon resigned. It's an issue that I have been in front of on day one, that we in the House have been in front of on day one. I am proud of the work that we have done, and because of our diligence, because we did not take no for an answer, we continued to push and we pressured MSU. We have received justice for the survivors in this matter, and I'm very proud of the work that we have done.
Well, first of all, I wanted to know all the facts. I think you want your next Attorney General, rather than give a knee-jerk reaction about somebody's career, I think you want them to gather all the facts. So it's really disingenuous for my opponent to sit up there and say after one news clipping that he called on her resignation. I will be an Attorney General that will look at all the different facts. Second of all, I think the difference is in terms of the two pieces of legislation that were passed out. The Senate version protected victims and victims' rights. It made sure that all coaches, paid coaches, were going to be mandatory reporters. Had Kathy Klages, the coach at MSU, reported what 2 young girls, 14 and 16, had reported to her that Larry Nassar abused them, then you wouldn't have 200 and 300 more victims than what you did. And so the law and the Senate, or the bills that passed out of the Senate, made sure. Instead, the bills that passed out of the House today took away the mandatory reporting for coaches. That's abominable. Is that going to be how he treats victims? And second of all, in terms of the statute of limitations, he picks winners and losers in terms of the number of victims out there. He picks winners that if you were part of MSU, you get retroactivity. If you were abused by somebody who isn't in the headlines, you don't get justice and retroactivity. That's an abomination.
I'll just say this, I will put my record as it relates to victims up against anybody's any day of the week. I've been in the courtroom, I've been in those sidebar rooms, I've held victims' hands, I've cried with them, I've been with them, I know what it's like. This was not a knee-jerk reaction. In fact, when I called on Luann Simon to resign, there were very few facts that weren't evident at the time that came forward at a later date. That's why we need a prosecutor in this office. We need somebody that can look at these facts, that can smell through the crap, and know when it's time to lay the hammer down, like I did with Luann Simon.
Chair for the Victims' Rights Caucus for the last 13 years, we have a vigil dedicated to victims and helping their families. I've never, ever seen my opponent, well, I've seen other prosecutors there, I've never seen my opponent stay in Lansing for the night and attend that vigil.
What is your opinion of sanctuary cities in Michigan and local control as far as their ability to make a city a sanctuary city? As the Attorney General, who's wants to go first on this?
I think it's fine.
Oh, very good, your turn.
I'm anti-sanctuary city. I have a clear record at protecting the rule of law and to making sure that we crack down as your next Attorney General in sanctuary cities. I've co-sponsored resolutions on Kate's Law and calling upon the federal government to ban funding for sanctuary cities here in this state. As your next Attorney General, I will do everything in my power to crack down on sanctuary cities. I do not stand for sanctuary cities. They go against the rule of law, and I will be your voice. Thank you.
Could not agree more, 100% opposed. In fact, I think many of you may remember about a year ago, Lansing tried to make themselves a sanctuary city. And I believe I was the only state elected official at the time, and I may be wrong about this, but the only state elected official at the time that actually issued a public statement, went after them, and essentially said this is wrong. Again, I am 100% opposed to sanctuary cities. I couldn't agree with Senator Shoemaker more. They are wrong, and we should do everything we can to prevent them.
Very good. What do you guys think about having English as the official language of Michigan? Should that happen?
100% support making English the official language of Michigan, and I have not faltered on that issue.
The bill that was sent over by the House actually came to the House Judiciary Committee, and I couldn't agree more. I believe that English is the official language of the state of Michigan, and I believe it's the language of our country, and that it is what unites us.
This is an issue that I have not faltered on. I am very glad to see that Senator Shoemaker has seen the light on this issue, because I know when she was in the House, the bill came up for a vote to make English the official language of the state of Michigan, and she was only one of 2 Republicans to vote against it and oppose it.
Can I respond? First of all, the language that was in the 2006 bill was actually quite different than the language as passed out. So you actually saw the problem with it, and the problem was that the committee amendment was stripped out at the last second. I represent a huge Hispanic community, and it's important for workplace safety to make sure that the forms of the state of Michigan for the workers that work on the farms in my district were printed in bilingual. And that committee amendment was stripped out at the last time. Obviously, my opponent, who probably put Representative Barrett up to proposing this bill, actually did the language right this time so that it will allow for workplace safety.
Tom Barrett is one of the most conservative members in the House of Representatives. I've never had to put Tom Barrett up to doing the right thing.
Next question has to do with religious liberty. And what is the Attorney General's role in protecting religious liberty? And would such protection of religious liberty in a community help Sharia law get enforced if a community wanted it? I think it's Senator Shoemaker's turn.
Well, first of all, I believe that we should pass the American Laws for American Courts bill, which sits over in the House of Representatives, and that would ensure that Sharia law is not ingrained in our way of life. Second of all, I think that I believe that we do have certain protections for religious liberty. I think the ultimate rule of law on this is the Constitution, and I support the Constitution.
Matt, this is an issue where, again, there is a very stark difference. Let me say this. First and foremost, absolutely, I support American laws and American courts. No foreign law has any part or business in our state laws whatsoever. But when it comes to RFRA, I've actually taken a vote on RFRA to support religious liberty. I've been there, I've done it, and I know later on when my opponent was asked what she thought about RFRA, her response in the media was, we don't need to be the poster child like Indiana. So not only did my opponent not support RFRA, but she threw our now Vice President and then Governor of Indiana under the bus by saying we don't need to be the poster child like Indiana. Folks, the state's next Attorney General cannot waver on religious liberty. I've never wavered on this issue, and I will not as your next Attorney General.
We have co-sponsored a RFRA bill. I don't have the year, but I did co-sponsor it.
Law enforcement agency in our state, the Attorney General, has a broad discretion in deciding which cases to take on and prosecute. If you were elected Attorney General, how would you choose to exercise that discretion? What types of cases would you dedicate most of the resources to? You want to start with that, Speaker Leonard?
When I hired on as a prosecutor in the Genesee County Prosecutor's Office, my boss asked me, Tom, what is the most powerful tool in law enforcement? And of course I said, the gun. And he said, no, it's not the gun. He said, it's this thing right here. He said, it's the power of the pen. He said, you have to know that a prosecutor every day has to seek justice. And that when they put that pen to the paper, they are essentially ruining somebody's lives when they charge them with a felony. I had a case where a young man, 18 years old, was charged with 3 counts of assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. 3 10-year felonies. And I went to the case. Fortunately, I was not the one that charged the case, but I was the one that prosecuted subsequently. And I went to the courtroom, and his defense attorney said, could you please sit down with this young man and speak with him? And I sat down and I spoke with this young man. And he told me, he said, sir, everything that's in that police report is 100% true. I did pull out a gun and I did shoot at these 3 individuals, but it was self-defense. And he said, I promise you, I didn't mean to hurt anybody, it was self-defense. I then asked my officer in charge to go to the scene of the crime, and there was a bus stop there that had a video camera. He went in, he asked them if there was a camera, a video of the scene, and fortunately, that camera was within 1 hour of resetting. We got the video, and it was exactly as the defendant had told us. Fortunately, because somebody sat with that young man for 5 minutes to hear his side of the story, he is not sitting in prison right now costing us $40,000 per year because he was exercising self-defense. So a prosecutor and attorney general has broad discretion, and they've got to know how to use it. I've been there, I've used it before, and I will make certain that as your state's next attorney general, I will seek justice every single day.
Now, we have seen that we have a prosecutor in the office named Jennifer Granholm, and we have seen that we have an attorney general named Bill Schuette. One had prosecutorial experience and one didn't. So there's a lot more that goes into an effective attorney general rather than just prosecutorial experience for 3 years. Actually, I believe it was 2 years and 8 or 9 months before you got laid off. But nonetheless, I think that there's nothing more than the Attorney General should rule without fear or favor of anyone. And let me tell you, I don't like what I see over in the House. He has divided that House. He has picked people that are his favorites that he will run legislation. I can give you a whole list of people that haven't had one piece of legislation moved. Not one piece of legislation. That's who he is. That's how he will be as Attorney General. Is that what you want as Attorney General? Is somebody who divides his own caucus?
Rebuttal?
Senator, you got me. It was 2 years and 9 months. I apologize. In terms of being laid off, as many of you know, Genesee County is unionized. And it's last one in, first one out. That's how it works. And when they laid off 6 prosecutors, I was the last person that got a pink slip. That's the story. In terms of my record in the House of Representatives, I will put it up against any other. Teacher pension reform hadn't been done in over 30 years. I made it to my top priority. We got it done. Getting rid of driver responsibility fees. Many before me tried to get it done. It didn't happen. Guess what? On October 1st of this year, because of my actions and because I stood firm against the governor, as well as working with the Senate, 350,000 residents of this state are going to be able to legally obtain a driver's license.
No fault vote failed. Income tax cut failed in a Republican House. That's leadership?
Next question. It has to do with our education system. And Michigan is ranking pretty badly, I think at 30th out of 50. And Detroit at, I think, last place. I'm just wondering, what can the Attorney General do to improve the state's education system? Senator Shoemaker, you want to start?
Okay.
Did you start last?
That's fine. Well, I'll tell you one thing that they can do. You know, so much of it is done in the legislature, but I will tell you something that's been done over the past couple of years. The Attorney General has the power and authority of Attorney General opinions. And those have the force of law unless a court overturns them or unless the legislature decides differently. And we passed Detroit's public school reform a couple of years ago. And we were guaranteed that when that legislation passed, that failing schools would shut down. And unfortunately, after the bills became law and these schools continued to fail, the governor had a different idea in terms of keeping them open. And we issued an Attorney General opinion request to now Attorney General Bill Schuette, and he issued an opinion answer saying, no, this is what the law says, and those schools have to shut down. Those failing schools have to shut down. So that's broad discretion or authority that the Attorney General would have over education is when these Attorney General opinion requests come in, ensuring that the rule of law is upheld.
I would totally agree with him on this, that the Attorney General can issue rule of law and Attorney General opinions and be an advocate for the rule of law in terms of enforcing the laws that we have. I would also go further, and this isn't really what the Attorney General does, nor is it really, it's really getting rid of Common Core. And I think that that's one way that the Attorney General can advocate for getting rid of Common Core. It's been a disaster in this state. And I will say that I know my opponent is going to go right there that I supported Common Core because his internet trolls actually take every shot at me in terms of doing that. So let me just tell you about the Common Core and get that right out of the way. First of all, the State Board of Education actually decided whether to implement a Common Core curriculum. And in the Senate, we actually put in the appropriations bill an amendment that said that you cannot do any fund to the Department of Education anymore for Common Core, and so without further authorization from the legislature. The bill to stop or to fund Common Core was a Tim Kelly bill, and it started in the House. My opponent is correct. I will say that Senator Thomas actually asked for a record roll call vote. He voted no. But then that same resolution came over to the House, to the Senate, and at the Senate, we added something that expanded upon local control to give locals more option and enhancement, and I agreed with that. I believe that we should give locals options, and I thought that was the way really to undo Common Core. And instead, that really hasn't worked. And so what I've done as a state senator is I co-sponsored, once I realized that local option wasn't going to work, is I co-sponsored Senator Patrick Colbeck's bill to eliminate Common Core, and then Senator Pavlov's. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've not co-sponsored anything, nor have you moved the Common Core bill out of the House.
I would just say, you know, Senator, there you go again. First and foremost, the name calling's got to stop. Let's stick with the fact. Not be stronger here. You supported Common Core, and you admitted that you supported it back then when evidently it was popular to do so. I was on the front lines with Tom McMillan. Tom McMillan would not support somebody that supported Common Core. I was on the front lines doing everything we could to stop the budget. Senator, you stood on top of that rostrum in the Senate as a member of leadership and gabbled through funding of Common Core without a record roll call vote, silencing great conservatives like Patrick Colbeck, not even giving them the decency of putting themselves on the record. As far as I'm concerned, I believe unilaterally you are responsible for funding Common Core because you sat there on that rostrum in the Senate and gabbled it through and didn't even give it a record roll call vote. The hypocrisy has got to stop.
We want to talk about hypocrisy here. That same language came over to you and you sat silently as it went by voice vote over the House of Representatives. So who's the hypocrite here? Say anything because it passed by voice vote in the House of Representatives with the amended Senate language that gave a local option. He can't refute that.
In 2013, I was not a member of leadership. I didn't stand on the rostrum. I didn't gavel it through without a record roll call vote.
Well, you sat there as a member and you didn't say boo before. You said...
It's hard for me to time if you guys...
Very good, Jim. Very good. Next question has to do with the swamp type of thing and campaign finance reform. In Congress, taxpayer-funded employees are not allowed to contribute to their bosses' political efforts. This makes sense to prevent bosses from demanding contributions in exchange for keeping their jobs and to avoid other ethical issues. What do you think about this issue? Do your taxpayer-funded employees donate to your political efforts?
Yes, I'll be clear. I have had employees contribute to my campaign. They have never been forced to. They did so voluntarily because they believed in me and they believed in my message. But I will tell you this, I am a strong proponent of transparency. When I became Speaker, the first action that I did, and it was something that I was actually able to do unilaterally, I made certain that every single member that works for the House of Representatives, that their salary is posted online and it is updated every single month for the world to see. Because I believe that's only fair. Those are your tax dollars and we need to know what those people are making. I was proud to lead the effort on FOIA reform, to open up the legislature in the executive branch to FOIA. So certainly, I'm proud of my record of transparency and will continue to support and push it, transparency further.
Ironically, he had an employee that gave him a $10,000 contribution. Now, I don't know what he's paying his employees, but I can tell you I've never received a $10,000 contribution from one of my employees. He's the Speaker of the House. He has about, how many staff do you have, Tom?
A little over 400.
How many staff in your office?
Well, every person in the House works at the pleasure of the Speaker.
Okay.
Very good. Next question.
A very powerful office.
Yes, very good. You are both have come out and strongly said you're pro-life. As if you're the Attorney General, if protesters were blocking a Planned Parenthood clinic, would you take action to help the patients receive an abortion? I believe Senator Schutmacher, you'd be first on this.
You know, that's a very good question. I am a strong believe in the pro-life cause and have been endorsed by Right to Life in every single election. I don't believe in exceptions. And, at the same rate. I think it would probably be a local effort. I can't think of an instance where the Attorney General would be called out to unblock what should be a local area, but I am 100% pro-life.
I too am proud to be 100% pro-life. I've been endorsed by Right to Life in each of my elections. Have continued to maintain 100% pro-life record, and as your state's next Attorney General, I will do everything I can to ensure that the sanctity of life is protected. As many of you know, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, because my wife and I, we were told about 5 years ago that we never had the ability or capability of having children. And I will tell you, and to the women in this room, I hope this doesn't offend anybody. I know my wife is going to be in tears here in just a moment. I never knew the impact and the burden that had on a young lady when she was told that news until I watched my wife endure that for 3 years. And we began the adoption process, and we're going to go over to China and adopt a little toddler from China. And about 2 weeks after I made the decision to run for Speaker, and a couple weeks before we were going to have to make a very substantial payment towards that adoption process, we found out Janelle was pregnant. And I will tell you this, not that I wasn't 100% pro-life before, because I was, but there is nothing more powerful than when you see that child on that ultrasound. And as your state's next Attorney General, I will do everything I can to protect the people of the state, including those children that are on those ultrasounds.
I think most of us hear about stories or know of people who are abusing the healthcare and insurance system. For example, someone falls at a business and tries to get the insurance company to pay for everything physically wrong in their life. Do you see this as a problem? Would you prosecute or refer to the authorities people who are committing or attempting to commit this fraud? I think Speaker Leonard.
Well, absolutely. In fact, the Attorney General's office does have a healthcare fraud unit to our division. And certainly we need to continue to investigate any type of insurance fraud, because quite frankly, not only is it wrong, not only is it against the law, but guess what? Anytime somebody's committing insurance fraud, it affects every person in this room. All it does is drive up their rates. All it does is drive up their premiums. So absolutely, as the state's next Attorney General, I would do everything I could to investigate and prosecute and stop insurance fraud.
I too would do everything as your next Attorney General to prosecute fraud, whether it's fraud in the Medicaid system, which already exists in the Attorney General's office, or my plans as Attorney General is really one way the Attorney General can bring down rates in auto insurance is to create a task force to go out and address the abuses with first-party benefits in car accidents as well. So.
And the next related question has to do with Medicaid and undocumented residents. Is this legal for undocumented residents to be receiving Medicaid? And if not, what can be done about it from the Attorney General's office? Senator Schutniger.
I think the American people, when Donald Trump ran for president, he really tapped into the sentiment of the American people, and that's that our residents are having to pay for other people in this country illegally. And so he really tapped into that anger and the frustration of benefits. And I think people don't mind having a social safety net, but they don't want it to be a way of life. And too often you see people, whether they're illegal or legal, tapping into the benefits that other people pay for. I have a strong record in the Senate of voting against making sure that there's benefits for illegal aliens, and I stand by that record.
Speaker on that.
Absolutely not should people that are here illegally be receiving our benefits, but unfortunately, because of many of these federal regulations and laws, it's happening. And I will tell you what we can do. We can be an advocate for changing many of these. In fact, I was at the White House on Monday. I was down there for 3 hours. I was with 15 other speakers. I met with Vice President Pence for about 30 or 40 minutes. I met with Kellyanne Conway. And I will tell you right now, I know we give credit to the tax reform because of a lot of the great things that are happening right now with our economy. And that's been wonderful. But I'm going to tell you right now, the biggest thing that we have seen that's helping our economy and helping our country grow right now is the regulatory reform that our president is implementing every single day. And we were down there and we were advocating, we were doing everything we could to have more flexibility with our Medicaid, with the food stamp program. So certainly I will continue to be an advocate to loosen up those regulations so that we as a state have more control and we can ensure that people that are here illegally are not receiving those benefits.
We always hear about the Washington swamp, where politicians get high-paid jobs and influence peddling intersect. Fox News had a segment about family members of politicians being paid money and given high-dollar contracts, the Biden family, as a way to feather the politician's nest. Do you think there's a Lansing swamp? And what do you think about those cozy arrangements? I think that's Senator Shoemaker goes first.
Actually, I think I went first.
Oh, did you? Okay. Speaker Leonard.
Well, certainly we need change in Lansing. We can certainly improve upon things. And I know this issue of the tax cut has been brought up several times tonight. And when you listen to that story, when you listen to why I put that up, I don't think there's any other example where somebody in the last couple of years has done what they could to take it to the Lansing swamp more than we did that night. People have asked me quite often, what has been the most shocking thing since you became Speaker? And I said I never knew how difficult it was going to be to get some Republicans to want to cut taxes. And we got that bill to the floor. We started working on it. I thought it was going to sail through. Representative Jim Tedder's here shaking his head. He did an incredible job. He thought it was going to sail through as well. And we found out we were going to be 2 or 3 votes short. And I met with my leadership team and I said, guys, I think we need to put this thing up tonight. I think we need to put everybody on the record. And they agreed. They had my back. I took my press secretary into the caucus room that night and I asked him, I said, we have to put this up tonight. I want you to paint the Armageddon scenario. What's going to happen when I put this thing up and it fails? He said, well, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you this. It's going to be the first time in nearly 20 years a speaker put up a failed vote, recorded it. He said the Lansing Lobby Corps is going to think you're absolutely crazy. He said the media is going to beat you up for over a week. And he said on Sunday, the Detroit Free Press is going to write a very nasty editorial about you. So let me tell you this. For the first time in nearly 30 years, we carried this state for our Republican nominee. When everybody thought we were going to lose a majority, we came in with a 63-seat majority. We came out with a 63-seat majority. And he said, I will tell you, it wasn't because of the Lansing Lobby Corps, it wasn't because of the media, and it certainly wasn't because of the Detroit Free Press. He said the people that were responsible for carrying the state for our president, the people that are responsible for giving us a 63-seat majority, the folks that hit those doors, made those phone calls, stamped those envelopes, they are going to be excited about the fact that there is finally a Republican caucus in town willing to stand up and fight for them. And that's what we did that night on the income tax cut.
I'm sure if you asked, let me address the income tax cut and then I'll get to your original question. I'm sure if you ask those 12 members, they will tell you all they really wanted was to understand where the cuts were going to come from. Back to my original statement in terms of the math needs to make sense. The math didn't make sense. All they wanted to know was where the cuts were. So instead, he throws 12 of his members under the bus, risking majority, and we'll see in the fall whether I'm right. He may be your nominee, I may be your nominee. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I've been a lifelong Republican. I care about the Republican cause, and I want to make sure that we have a Republican House, Senate, Attorney General, Secretary of State, and Governor. And it's not looking good out there. You all know the cycle, the pendulum goes back and forth, and instead, he puts up a tax vote that fails. He put up a no-fault vote that failed. That would have, rather than look at real good policy and how you can assemble the votes, he doesn't do that. He puts up votes that failed. That's failed leadership. In terms of your original question, I do support FOIA and more transparency. I think that those laws need to be aggressively looked at. I think the Speaker started his term out with those tenets, and have they passed out of the House? I don't think so. once again, failed leadership. I also do believe, though, that you can have all the laws in the world, and if you know what's in your heart and the person has integrity, I have lived my life with integrity and what's in my heart and doing what I believe to be right for the citizens I represent. I will be your Attorney General that will have integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Yeah, I would just say this. I mean, I don't accept that logic. I believe it's backwards. We talk about all the time how we need to manage government the way we do our own households. And let me ask you this. Do you put together your budget before you know what you're going to get paid the following year? No, you find out what you're going to get paid and then you put together your budget. Our goal that night was to tell government, no, you're going to get by with less. We're going to tell you what you're going to get paid, and then we're going to craft our budget as such. We were treating it just like you do a household income. In terms of standing up against the government swamp, I just say this. I remember when Senator Colbeck was removed from his committees. This is the #2 ranking person in the Senate, and I never heard anything out of her when he was removed from his committees.
You can ask Senator Colbeck. At the end of the day, I do believe that you also removed somebody, and I didn't hear a peep out of you.
I removed somebody because he lied to the caucus about his vote on the income tax vote, and I don't regret it.
And that is, if you don't win and your opponent becomes the nominee, will you support the nominee of the party?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Very good. Each of you gets 3 minutes. I think that since on the opening statements, Senator Shoemaker will start off with Speaker Leonard with a 3-minute closing statement.
Thank you, Matt. And again, thank you everybody for being here tonight. Senator Shoemaker, thank you for being here as well. If there's one thing that I want you to remember when you leave here tonight, and I believe it's been made clear, remember who is the person most qualified to lead on day one and has stayed true to the values that mean most to us as Republicans. I've got the experience having been a prosecutor. I've got the experience within the Attorney General's office. I've led on major issues as Speaker of the House. But we've got a very tough year coming up ahead of us. And I will tell you this, we have the campaign that is best organized to win this fall. We are currently sitting on a 2-to-1 cash-on-hand advantage. As you saw yesterday or the day before last through the email that Tom McMillan sent out, we have over 100 county chairs covering every single county. We are ready to win on day one. And when I become your Republican nominee on August 25th, we will get to work the following day. And I promise you, we're going to win this thing in November, and I will not let you down as your state's next Attorney General. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's important that we have an Attorney General that has the integrity, that has the proven record, that represents our values. I am that person. I've worked hard on critical issues that affect everyday Michiganders' lives, such as dealing with the opioid epidemic, such as dealing with securing our criminal victims' rights, such as giving law enforcement the tools necessary to go out and catch cold cases. I believe that I am the best one to win the general election. I have won in counties where the Democrats have come at me with hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I've still won in counties that have voted for Barack Obama, not once, but twice. My opponent comes from a very safe seat. He's never been through a tough election. I'm the one with the private sector experience that has worked in the private sector dealing with all areas of the law. I've not been on the government dime my whole life. I ask for your vote, and thank you very much for attending tonight.